I'm glad you are an expert and a lawyer at the same time, so you can look at the law and you can also dive deep into the sector as we're doing right now. Nigerians barely a month ago got the notification about a hike in tariff for Band A, right? And that was touted as, okay, this is a good thing, right? We need to get more money into the sector. We're not paying as much as we ought to for electricity, particularly if you're enjoying this. Even the minister even suggested we should turn off our freezers. He apologized later because of the backlash and the rest. And now we're saying we want to unbundle barely a month after. To the average Nigerian, this might seem as though, are we confused? Why are we, is this trial and error? Just barely a month ago, you said it was a tariff issue. Well, now I say, oh, it's not just tariff. We need to unbundle. Mr. Oni, is it confusion? Is it just trial and error? Are we just trying to throw everything at it, even the sink, just see whatever is going to work? Because when you look at it, you don't see a consistency, a pattern to this.
Okay, that's a pretty good question. I think it's a potpourri of issues. First, any sector that undergoes reforms, you will see this sort of thing. Question you should ask is, what's the overall policy? The overall policy determines the steps you will take. One. Secondly, when you have a change in personnel, the current minister wasn't minister 2 years ago, right? Wasn't probably minister a year ago, I think. I think it's May 12 last year, or June, or whenever they became ministers. So some of these ideas will change. And also you have to take into consideration the fact that the law has changed. Now, the law has some requirements. One of those requirements is that what you term unbundling for each state distribution licensee. That's one. Secondly, with respect to that banding, that's a different conversation. And I'll explain what that is. Prior to this time, there was a lot of complaint around people not having electricity, and you would say your billing isn't appropriate, you don't have meter, so there is estimates. Now, what the regulator sought to do from like 2020 was to ensure that we have a service-based tariff system, so that if you get high-quality service, you pay the actual, a better price, or the near cost-reflective pricing. But there was a difference between what the tariff was and what individuals were paying. Government was paying that difference. That's where the subsidy was. But the inability of government to be able to afford meant that government was answering off paying that difference, and individuals, starting with Band A, will begin to pay all of that sums themselves. Rather than it being 225 naira, but you pay 60 and government pays the difference. Government says, no, we can't afford it anymore. It's tripling, it's quadrupling what we should be paying. So I think that so much is happening that it's not so much about throwing the sink at the problem. It's about the fact that we're going through reforms, and so many things that have been done that haven't quite worked because it's multifaceted. The problem is, from a tariffing point of view, from people not wanting to pay, tariff wasn't adequate. From discourse, some of them having marketing discipline and maybe even corporate governance issues. So you need to deal with these issues one by one. And it's difficult to focus on just one issue and deal with it. By the time you come back with the next issue, it's gone way out of hand. So I think what the government has been doing, what the minister has been doing, is to select those issues and deal with them as they come up. For example, the ministry is working, and I'm not holding forth for the minister. I've said some things he probably not like also, but I think they're working on a policy, integrated policy. I've always said, if we do not integrate stuff with what's happening with different states having their discourse and taking over the market, it'll be chaos. You just hear that this state is saying they will be using 110 volts, that state is 220. So working on policy, as they work on policy, which is the overarching thing, it then determines what steps will be taken. And those steps are already being taken.
But Mr. Oni, pardon me.
Anticipation.
Mr.